The Girl Who Talked to Photographs. The instructions were printed on a single sheet of paper, left on the kitchen island in a house so large that Clara had already gotten lost twice between the service entrance and the laundry room. She read them standing up, still wearing her coat, because no one had told her she could sit down and she wasn't going to assume. Household staff are to maintain professional distance at all times. Ms. Lily Hale, age 7, has a designated schedule. Meals at the times listed. Bedtime at 8:30. Staff are not to engage in extended personal conversation with Ms. Lily unless necessary for her care. Mr. Hale's study on the 3rd floor is off limits. The West Wing is off limits. Questions should be directed to Mrs. Paulson, the house manager. Clara folded the paper, tucked it into the front pocket of her uniform, and looked around the kitchen. It was a beautiful room, the kind designed by someone who had never actually cooked in it. Marble countertops in a shade of gray that cost more per square foot than Clara's monthly rent. Pendant lights hanging at precise intervals. A 6-burner stove that gleamed like it had never been touched. On the far end of the island, weighted down by a set of keys, sat a stack of envelopes. Bills mostly. Invoices. The logo on the topmost envelope caught her eye before she could stop herself. Mercer, Holt, and Associates. The letters pressed into the cream-colored paper, with the kind of confidence that only came from a firm that had never lost a case it cared about. She looked away. She was very good at looking away these days. Mrs. Paulson found her 2 minutes later, a compact woman in her 60s with silver hair pinned flat, and the expression of someone who had managed large households long enough to develop a permanent mild suspicion of everyone who entered them. "You're the new girl," she said, though Clara was 31 and had not been a girl for a long time. "Clara Dessa," Clara said. "I spoke with the agency on Thursday." "I know who you are." Mrs. Paulson looked her over with the efficiency of a customs officer. "Mr. Hale doesn't take his breakfast until 7:15. Lily is up at 6:30. She'll want oatmeal with brown sugar, but she's supposed to have the egg whites and fruit listed on the nutrition plan. You'll find it on the refrigerator. She'll argue. Don't negotiate." A brief pause. "She's a good child. She just misses her mother." Clara nodded. She did not ask how long ago the mother had died. She did not ask anything at all. She had learned in the past 3 years that the less she asked, the less she had to answer in return. Her room was on the ground floor, off the kitchen. Small, clean, with a window that looked out onto the side garden where the hydrangeas had gone brown for winter. She unpacked her 2 bags with the practiced economy of someone who had moved often enough that she no longer bothered unfolding things she'd just have to fold again. A change of uniforms, 3 books, a photograph she kept face down in the bottom of the bag and did not take out. She was in bed by 9:30 and asleep before 10, and she did not dream about anything she needed to remember in the morning. Lily Hale had her mother's eyes. Clara noticed this the way you noticed a detail in a room you were trying not to look at too carefully, peripherally, unavoidably. The child sat at the kitchen island the next morning, in a school uniform 2 sizes too precise, her dark hair braided by someone who clearly followed a tutorial, rather than knowing instinctively how a child's hair wanted to fall. She was looking at her plate of egg whites with the focused contempt of someone who had been served this particular plate many times before. "I don't like Lily said without looking up. "I know," Clara said. She set a glass of orange juice to the right of the plate, exactly where the nutrition sheet specified. "Mrs. Carroll used to put cheese in them." "Mrs. Carroll isn't here anymore." Lily finally looked up. She had the direct, undeflected gaze of children who hadn't yet learned that staring was considered rude. "Why are you here?" "To help take care of the house, and to help take care of you." "Mrs. Carroll cried when she left. Did you know that?" "I didn't know Mrs. Carroll. She said Daddy was too hard to work for." Lily picked up her fork and moved a piece of egg white from one side of the plate to the other. "Are you going to cry when you leave?" Clara considered the question with more seriousness than a 7-year-old probably expected. "I don't plan on leaving anytime soon." "Everyone says that." Lily put the fork down. "Can I have oatmeal?" "Eat 3 bites of what's in front of you first." Lily looked at her with an expression caught somewhere between surprise and reassessment. Then she picked up the fork and ate 3 bites without another word. She met Nathaniel Hale at 7:14 when he came downstairs in a charcoal suit and the particular posture of a man running 30 seconds behind a schedule he kept in his head. He was younger than she'd expected from the house, early 40s maybe, with the kind of jaw that photographs well and eyes that had the permanent slight tension of someone who slept less than he should. He poured his own coffee without looking at the cup, the way people do when they've done something so many times their hands have memorized the path. He noticed Clara the way people noticed furniture they hadn't personally selected, registered, categorized, filed. "You're new," he said. "Yes, sir. Clara Dessa. I started yesterday." "Lily give you any trouble this morning?" "No trouble at all." He looked at his daughter, who was now eating her egg whites with the resigned efficiency of a child who had made a deal and intended to honor it. Something moved across his face. Relief, or the near cousin of it. "Good," he said. He picked up his coffee, picked up his phone, and left the kitchen. Clara heard the front door close at exactly 7:16. Lily watched the door for a moment after he was gone. Then she looked back at her plate. "He has a lot of meetings," she said. "I'm sure he does. Mom used to make him sit down for breakfast." She said it without accusation, just as information, the way children report facts about the world they have not yet decided how to feel about. She said that 5 minutes at the table was better than 5 hours of apologies later. Clara did not respond to that. She took Lily's empty plate to the sink and turned on the water, and she told herself that the tightness in her chest was nothing, just the adjustment of the first week, just the ordinary weight of a new place. She was very good at telling herself things. It was 11:30 that night when Clara heard it. She had been awake anyway, lying on top of her blanket reading one of her 3 books, when the sound came through the wall. Not crying exactly, but the low murmur of a child's voice in a one-sided conversation. She put the book down and listened. The sound was coming from upstairs, 1 floor up, in the direction of what she had mapped in her head as the family rooms. She told herself it wasn't her business. She told herself the child was probably fine, probably just talking in her sleep. Then she heard Lily say, clearly enough to carry through the old walls of the house, "I told Daddy about the school play, but he forgot to put it on his phone." "I know you would have remembered." Clara got up. She put on her slippers and her cardigan, and she went upstairs because she was constitutionally incapable of not going upstairs when a child was talking to someone who wasn't there. The door to Lily's room was half open. The room was dim, lit only by the nightlight in the shape of a moon that cast everything in a low amber glow. Lily was sitting up in bed, cross-legged, holding a framed photograph in both hands, speaking to it with the solemn concentration of someone who believed absolutely in the conversation they were having. Clara stood in the doorway. Lily didn't startle when she noticed her. She just looked up with those direct eyes and said, "I was telling Mom about my week." "I heard," Clara said. She didn't say, "I'm sorry for interrupting," or "you should be asleep." She just stood there, and then, because standing in a doorway is not the same as being present, she walked into the room and sat down on the edge of the bed. Lily held the photograph out to her. In it, a woman with Lily's eyes and a wide, uncomplicated smile stood in what looked like a garden in summer, squinting slightly against the sun, laughing at whoever was behind the camera. She looked like someone who would have remembered the school play. "Her name was Catherine," Lily said, "but Dad called her Kate. I called her Mom." She paused. "I'm allowed to still talk to her, right? Grandma Diane says it's not healthy, but I think it's healthy. I think she can still hear me." The question hung in the amber light of the room, and Clara understood, in the way you understand things that land somewhere beneath language, that this was not a question that had a correct professional answer. "I think," Clara said slowly, "that love doesn't really have an off switch. So if you're sending it in her direction, I think it's going somewhere." Lily considered this with the gravity of a scientist reviewing new data. Then she nodded, apparently satisfied, and placed the photograph carefully back on her nightstand. "Do you have a mom?" Lily asked. "I do. She lives in Ohio." "Do you talk to her?" A beat too long before the answer. "Not as often as I should." Lily looked at her, and in the amber light of the nightlight, with those eyes that were her mother's, she said, "You should call her, before you can't anymore." Clara sat with that for a moment. Then she reached out and straightened the edge of Lily's blanket, a small, unnecessary gesture, the kind that means I am here when you don't have the right words. Lie down, she said. It's past your bedtime by 3 hours. Lily lay down with surprising compliance. Clara waited until the child's breathing evened out, slow and certain, before she stood and moved to the door. Clara, Lily said, not quite asleep. Yeah. I'm glad you came upstairs. Clara didn't answer. She pulled the door to its half-open position and went back downstairs, and she sat on the edge of her bed and did not pick up her book for a long time. Diana Whitmore arrived at the house on Friday afternoon with the particular energy of someone who considered every visit a form of inspection. She was Catherine's younger sister. Clara had gathered this from Mrs. Paulson's briefing, and she moved through the Hale house with the proprietary ease of someone who had decided, at some point, that grief conferred ownership. She found Clara reorganizing the pantry and looked at her the way one looks at something placed slightly wrong on a shelf. You're the new one, Diana said. Yes, ma'am. Clara Dessa. Diana did not offer her name in return. She looked around the pantry with a critical eye, then looked back at Clara. How are you finding it here? Very comfortable, thank you. Nathaniel goes through help quickly. She said it conversationally the way you'd mentioned weather. The last three couldn't handle Lily. The one before that couldn't handle Nathaniel. A small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You seem composed for someone in your position. Clara met her gaze with the steady pleasantness she had spent 3 years perfecting. I try to do my job well. Diana held the look for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then she turned and walked toward the kitchen, and Clara heard her speaking to Nathaniel in a low voice. And though she couldn't make out the words, she recognized the cadence. It was the cadence of someone planting a thought. That evening, after Lily was in bed and the house had gone quiet, Clara stood at the kitchen sink rinsing the dinner dishes and thought about the envelope on the counter. Mercer, Holt, and Associates. She thought about the fact that Diana Whitmore had watched her hands the whole time they were talking, the way a person watches something they're trying to memorize. She thought about 3 years and how long that was, and how you could change your name and your city and your profession and the way you wore your hair, and still the past had a way of recognizing you from across a room. She turned off the tap and dried her hands and went to bed. She was very good at going to bed. What fathers don't know how to say. On the first Saturday of Clara's employment at the Hale house, Nathaniel Hale attempted to spend time with his daughter. Clara observed this from the kitchen, which had a sight line into the back sitting room where the attempt was taking place. Nathaniel sat on the sofa with his phone face down on the cushion beside him, a deliberate, visible act of putting the phone down. And Lily sat across from him with a book in her lap, and they were both doing the thing where you try very hard to look relaxed in a situation that isn't relaxed at all. How was school this week? Nathaniel asked. Fine, Lily said. Did you do anything interesting? We learned about volcanoes. That's good. Volcanoes are interesting. A pause. Did you have swimming on Thursday? Wednesday. Right. Wednesday. How was that? Fine. He picked up a magazine from the coffee table, put it back down. He was, Clara thought, a man who was very good at solving problems that had definable solutions and was deeply uncomfortable in the presence of problems that didn't. I thought maybe we could go to the Natural History Museum tomorrow, he said. They have a new exhibit. Dinosaurs, I think. Or maybe space. I'll have Marcus look into it. Okay, Lily said, in the tone of a child who has been to enough scheduled enrichment activities to know that okay is the easiest answer. Or something else, if you'd rather. The museum is fine. Nathaniel looked at his daughter for a moment, and Clara saw the things she had seen on that first morning. That flicker of something, Relief's cousin but further away. He wanted to say something, she could tell. Something that wasn't about volcanoes or museums or scheduled swimming. But whatever it was, he didn't know how to cross the distance between thought and word. Okay, he said. Museum tomorrow, then. He picked up his phone. The museum trip did not happen because Nathaniel's 7 o'clock Sunday morning call ran until noon. And by the time it was over, Lily had already moved on. Clara found her in the sunroom with a box of colored pencils and 6 sheets of paper spread across the floor, drawing something with intense concentration. What are you making? Clara asked, sitting cross-legged on the floor nearby with the laundry list she was supposed to be reviewing. A map, Lily said without looking up, of all the places I want to go someday. Where is this? That's the ocean. Those are dolphins. That's a castle in Ireland. Clara, do you know if there are real castles in Ireland? There are, hundreds of them. Some of them you can actually stay in overnight. Lily looked up with the expression of someone receiving unexpectedly excellent news. Like a hotel? Exactly like a hotel, with stone walls and big fireplaces, and sometimes they say they're haunted. Haunted, Lily tasted the word. I wouldn't be scared. I'd want to talk to them. She went back to her drawing, adding what appeared to be battlements to the castle. Have you been to Ireland? Not yet. We should go sometime. Clara looked down at the laundry list. I think you'd better take your dad. Dad doesn't like castles. He likes cities. He says you can tell the character of a place by its skyline. Lily paused. I don't really know what that means. It means your dad is very much a New York person. Are you a New York person? Clara thought about the answer to that question, thought about the office on the 42nd floor, and the view of the Hudson from the conference room, and the particular way the light fell on Lower Manhattan at 4 in the afternoon in October, the way it fell like a verdict, illuminating everything. I used to be, she said. Lily nodded, satisfied with this, and continued drawing. Nathaniel appeared in the doorway at 12:40, still in his work clothes despite it being Sunday, holding his phone with the loosened grip of someone who had just finished something exhausting. He looked at the papers spread across the sunroom floor, at the colored pencils, at Lily explaining something to Clara about the correct color of the Irish Sea. Hey, Bug, he said. I'm sorry about the museum. It's okay, Lily said. She didn't stop drawing. We'll go next Sunday. I'll block it off. Okay. He looked at Clara, and Clara looked at the laundry list, and there was a silence that had several layers to it. Thank you, he said finally, addressing Clara, for staying with her. It's my job, sir, Clara said. Something shifted in his expression, a small, barely perceptible movement, like the ground settling. Right, he said. Of course. He left. Lily didn't look up from her map. He feels bad, Lily said quietly. I know, Clara said. He always feels bad. Then he works more, and then he feels bad again. Mom used to call it his loop. She added a small sun in the upper corner of the Ireland page. She said the only thing that broke the loop was when he remembered to look up. Diana came again on Tuesday, this time with a woman she introduced to Nathaniel as a family friend who ran a placement agency specializing in household staff for high-net-worth families. The meeting happened in the front parlor with the door mostly closed. Clara kept to the kitchen, but the house was old and sound traveled in the old way, through walls and around corners, arriving slightly distorted but still legible. She didn't catch all of it. She caught enough. Just saying, Nathaniel, that with Lily at such a sensitive developmental stage, the right kind of influence, someone with verifiable references, background thoroughly checked. I'm not suggesting anything, only that you want to be certain. Later, Mrs. Paulson found Clara in the laundry room and told her, with the awkward directness of someone delivering an unpleasant piece of information, that Mr. Hale had asked Marcus, the house manager, to do a thorough review of all current staff files. Standard procedure, Mrs. Paulson said. Happened every 6 months or so. Nothing to worry about. Clara folded a towel, then another. She was very good at folding. Of course, she said. That makes sense. After Mrs. Paulson left, Clara stood in the laundry room for a moment with a folded towel in each hand and thought clearly, methodically, the way she had once thought through the weak points in a legal argument. The agency had placed her under the name Clara Dessa. The references were real. She had worked under that name for 18 months in a household in New Haven before this one. The background check would find nothing beyond what she had put there. But Diana Whitmore had watched her hands, and the envelope with the Mercer Holt logo was still on the kitchen counter, and Clara was not the only person in this house who might know what that logo meant. She put the towels away and went to check on Lily. Wednesday evening, Lily got a fever. It came on quickly, the way children's fevers do. She was fine at dinner, quiet but fine, and by 7:30 she was curled on the sofa with the blank, glassy eyes of a child whose body has decided to wage a war without consulting them first. Clara took her temperature, got it down with the appropriate medication, filled a water glass and settled into the armchair beside the sofa with her book, because the child was sick and there was nowhere else she was going to be. Nathaniel was in Boston. He called at 8:15 when Mrs. Paulson texted him, and Clara heard Lily's end of the conversation from across the room. "I'm okay, Daddy." And then, "Clara's here." And then after a pause, "She's sitting right next to me," said in a tone that meant, "You don't need to worry, because there is someone here who is present in the specific way I need someone to be present." After the call, Lily looked at Clara with the candid, fever-softened honesty of sick children. "Do you like it here?" she asked. "I do," Clara said, and was mildly surprised to realize she meant it. "Enough to stay?" Clara looked at the child on the sofa, the dark hair loose without its too precise braid, the eyes that were Catherine's, the small hands wrapped around the glass of water with the careful grip of someone feeling very fragile and trying not to show it. She thought about the Mercer Holt envelope. She thought about Diana in the parlor. "Get some sleep," she said. "You'll feel better in the morning." Lily accepted this with the trust of a sick child who is too tired to push further. She was asleep within 10 minutes. Clara did not move from the armchair. Nathaniel arrived home from Boston at 11:40, taking the stairs two at a time, and stopped in the sitting room doorway at the sight of Clara still in the armchair and Lily still on the sofa, her breathing now easy and regular. He stood there a moment, suit jacket over one arm, looking at the tableau of it. "She's been asleep since 9, Clara said quietly. He crossed the room and pressed the back of his hand against Lily's forehead, the specific gesture of a parent performing a check he both needs and dreads. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. "Temperature came down around 8, Clara said. "She kept water down. She should be fine by morning." He straightened up and looked at Clara with the particular attention of a man who has been thinking about something on a train for 2 hours. "You didn't have to stay." "I wanted to." He seemed to hear the thing inside that sentence. Not the loyalty of an employee, but the one of someone who had decided, without being asked, that this mattered. It made him uncomfortable. She could see it happen. The brief opening, then the calibration, then the closing off. He was a man who monitored the temperature of his own reactions with the same precision he applied to everything else. "Thank you," he said. Professional, measured. A door held open a crack and then carefully eased shut. Clara nodded and excused herself. She went to her room and lay on top of the covers and looked at the ceiling and thought about calibration, about the way people learn to shut themselves off in the exact shape of whatever hurt them last. She was very good at that too. Marcus Reeves found her the next morning when she was making Lily's breakfast and told her in a tone that tried to be casual that Mr. Hale had asked him to let all staff know their hours might be reviewed as part of a restructuring. He would need, if she didn't mind, to photograph her identification documents. Clara handed over the Connecticut driver's license under the name Clara Dessa without a flicker. Marcus left. Clara turned back to the stove. She was starting to understand that she had maybe 2 weeks before Diana found the thread she was looking for. Perhaps less. The question was not whether to go. It was whether she could go before it became a problem for Nathaniel, and whether she could survive leaving Lily. The second thing surprised her. She hadn't expected to care this much this fast. She hadn't expected to sit in an armchair all night for someone else's child and feel, not duty, but something that rhymed with belonging. She poured the oatmeal into the bowl, added the brown sugar, and called Lily for breakfast. The name nobody was supposed to say. Diana Whitmore sat down across from Nathaniel in his home office on a Thursday afternoon and placed a single sheet of paper on the desk between them. She did it with the careful deliberateness of someone who has rehearsed the gesture, who wants the moment to land with the right weight. Nathaniel looked at the paper. It was a printout, a grainy photograph, clearly a screenshot from a news archive, of a woman in her late 20s walking out of a courthouse. She was turned slightly toward the camera, not posing, caught in motion, wearing a dark blazer. Beside the photograph, a headline, Mercer Holt, associate disbarred, amid evidence tampering inquiry. Claire Ashworth surrenders license. Below the article, someone had printed a second image, a DMV photograph, the kind taken without flattery under fluorescent light. The name on the record, Dessa Clara M. The face, unmistakably the same. Nathaniel looked at the paper for a long moment. Then he looked up at Diana. "Where did you get this?" he said. "I have a friend at the agency," Diana said. She kept her voice gentle, regretful, the voice of someone who hated to be the one to bring bad news. "I wasn't looking for anything, Nathaniel. I just wanted to make sure Lily was safe. You know how I feel about Lily." "I do know how you feel about Lily," he said carefully. "She lost her mother. She's at an age where she's forming attachments. And this woman," Diana touched the edge of the paper, "she lied about who she is. She had a law license, Nathaniel. She was disbarred for evidence tampering. She's been using a false name." Nathaniel said nothing. He looked at the photograph again. "I'll speak with her," he said finally. He found Clara in the garden, raking the dead hydrangea debris into a pile by the fence. He had not come through the kitchen. He had come through the side door, which meant he had needed a moment before this conversation and had walked the long way around to get it. She saw him coming and stopped raking, and she knew from the way he was walking, measured, deliberate, the walk of a man going towards something he'd rather not do, that the conversation had arrived. He stood a few feet from her. He held the paper at his side, not showing it yet. "I need to ask you something." "All right," Clara said. He held the paper out. She looked at it. She did not perform surprise. She did not try to buy time with a question or a deflection. She had learned in 3 years of being someone else that the moment of recognition had its own dignity if you let it. "Your name isn't Clara Dessa," he said. It wasn't a question. "My name is Claire Ashworth," she said. "I've gone by Clara Dessa for 3 years." He was watching her face, looking for something. She wasn't sure what. Guilt, maybe, or shame, or the particular expression of someone caught in a deception who is about to compound it. She didn't know what he found. "The article says evidence tampering," he said. "It does. Did you tamper with evidence?" She met his gaze. This was the question she had answered inside herself 10,000 times in 3 years, in hotel rooms and rented apartments and service quarters of other people's houses, in the dark of other people's nights. She had shaped her answer down to its bones. "No," she said. "Evidence was tampered with. The distinction matters, but I understand why a newspaper doesn't always make it." The rake was still in her hands. She set it against the fence. She was aware that her hands were steady and she was faintly glad of it. "I was disbarred," she continued, "because a case I was working on intersected with interests that someone with more power than me did not want intersected with. Certain documents surfaced that appeared to implicate me. By the time I could demonstrate the problem with those documents, the board had voted and the decision was final." She paused. "I didn't fight it the way I should have. I was 28 and I had run out of money and I was tired, and I made the choice to walk away from it and start over." A beat. "That was probably a mistake. I've had 3 years to think about it." Nathaniel looked at the fence. He looked at the dead hydrangeas. He looked at the paper in his hand. "Why here?" he said. "Why this job?" "Because the agency had an opening, and I needed work, and I am very good at taking care of a house. And Lily." The name landed between them. Clara felt it. "Yes," she said quietly. "And Lily." He folded the paper along its crease. Once, then again, the precise folds of a man containing something. "You should have told me," he said. "Yes," she said. "I should have. If you had told me, you would have called the agency and I wouldn't be here." She said it without accusation, just as a fact. "And that was a calculation I made for myself. I'm not asking you to approve of it." He was quiet for a moment. A bird moved through the bare branches of the oak tree at the garden's edge, a flash of movement in the gray December afternoon. "Diana's going to want me to let you go," he said. "I know. She has a point about the judgment involved in having someone in this house whose background—" "She has a point," Clara said. "And if that's your decision, I understand it." He looked at her then, really looked. the way he hadn't quite managed to do in the preceding weeks, the way people look when they're trying to see past the surface version of a person to whatever is actually underneath. Lily asked for you last night, he said. When she had the nightmare, she said, can you go get Clara? She didn't say Mrs. Paulson. She didn't say anyone else. Clara said nothing. He turned and walked back toward the house. At the door, he stopped with his hand on the frame and spoke with his back to her. I'm not letting you go, he said, but I want you to understand that I'm not comfortable with what you've told me, and I think you owe me more than what you've given me today. He went inside. Clara stood in the garden for a while with her hands free and the dead hydrangeas at her feet, and she thought about the signature she had seen on the document Diana brought. She had noticed it the way she noticed the Mercer Holt logo, peripherally against her will, the muscle memory of 3 years of legal work firing without her permission. It was a notarized certification stamp. The notary's name was a blur in the grainy printout, but the firm code below it, a small string of letters and numbers that meant nothing to anyone who hadn't worked in the specific intersection of Connecticut property law and corporate restructuring, meant something to her. It was the same code she had seen 3 years ago on documents filed in Bridgeport Superior Court, filed by the opposing party in the case she had been working on when everything fell apart. She stood in the cold garden and felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time, the particular cold clarity of a lawyer who has just seen a pattern in the evidence. That night, Lily appeared at Clara's door at 9:45, which was well past her bedtime and well past the point where Clara should have sent her back upstairs immediately. I had a bad dream, Lily said. She was holding her stuffed rabbit by one ear. Clara held the door open. Lily came in and sat on the edge of the bed, looking around the small room with the frank curiosity of a child cataloging a new space. You don't have many things, Lily observed. I'm a light traveler. My mom had a lot of things. Dad says she collected. He means it like a compliment, but sometimes I think it makes him sad. Clara sat in the chair by the window. What was the bad dream about? I was in a big building and I couldn't find you, Lily said simply. Or Dad. I just kept walking around and all the doors were the wrong doors. Clara looked at the child, at the rabbit held by one ear, at the dark hair loose and tangled from sleep, at the matter-of-fact way she described something that was clearly frightening. You found me, though, Clara said. Right now. You walked to the right door. Lily considered this. That's true. She looked at the rabbit. Clara, are you going to leave? The question came without preamble or strategic setup, the way children's most important questions always did, delivered straight through all the adult scaffolding designed to soften them. I don't know, Clara said, because it was true and Lily deserved true. Lily nodded slowly. Daddy talked to you today. I saw him go to the garden. He did. Was it about the paper Aunt Diana brought? Clara paused. You saw that. I see a lot of things, Lily said, with the ageless pragmatism of a child who has learned to read rooms out of necessity. I know my aunt doesn't like you. She didn't like Mrs. Carroll either. She doesn't like people who Daddy likes. She said it with the calm clarity of a 7-year-old reporting an observed pattern, not an accusation. What makes you think your dad likes me? Lily looked at her with patient, tolerant eyes. He came home from Boston when you texted that I was sick. He came from Boston, Clara. He never came home early for Mrs. Carroll. Clara said nothing for a moment. Go back to bed, she said finally gently. I'll walk you up. They walked up the stairs quietly, past the closed door of Nathaniel's study where a line of light showed under the door, and Clara thought about the line of light and about the notation on a disbarment document and about a firm code that shouldn't have appeared in 2 different legal proceedings 3 years apart. She got Lily settled and pulled the blanket up and said goodnight, and on the way back downstairs she did not look at the line of light under the study door, but she felt it. She sat at the small desk in her room and opened her laptop and stared at the screen for a long time. Then she began to search. The name of the company that had filed the opposing brief in the Bridgeport case was Hargrove Property Development, LLC. It had been dissolved 18 months after the case concluded. The principal shareholder, according to the Connecticut Secretary of State records, she still knew how to navigate in her sleep, had been a holding company registered in Delaware. She already knew this. She had dug this far 3 years ago and hit the wall that Delaware shell companies are designed to be, impenetrable from the outside. But she had not 3 years ago known what she knew now. She knew the Hale family. She knew their foundation documents, which she had read when Mrs. Paulson had asked her to file them. She knew the name of the law firm that handled the Hale family's charitable trust, Mercer, Holt, and Associates. And she knew now that Mercer, Holt had represented a client in a real estate transaction in 2019, a transaction she had seen referenced in the Hale Foundation's historical documents as an adjacent property acquisition for a community garden project that had ultimately fallen through. The property that had fallen through, the property in Bridgeport. She sat back in her chair and felt the pieces shift against each other, not yet fully aligned, but close. Close enough to see the shape of what they were becoming. She closed the laptop. She looked at the photograph she still kept face down at the bottom of her bag. She did not take it out. She was going to need more. She was going to need documents she didn't have, or access she didn't have, or a piece of the chain she was still missing. She was also going to need to decide whether she was willing to pay what it would cost to get them. The cost of speaking the truth. The letter arrived on a Monday morning, a formal notice, on Whitmore family letterhead, addressed to Nathaniel, informing him that Diana, in her capacity as a member of the Hale Family Foundation's advisory board, was requesting an emergency review of household staff in light of concerns regarding the welfare of Lily Hale, minor beneficiary of the foundation. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 2 in the afternoon at the foundation's offices in Midtown Manhattan. Mrs. Paulson brought the letter to Nathaniel at breakfast. Clara was in the kitchen when he read it, and she could tell from the set of his jaw and the deliberate way he folded the letter that it had landed the way Diana intended it to land. Not just as a complaint, but as a claim of jurisdiction. Diana was not using her status as Lily's aunt. She was using her status as a board member, which meant she was using the institutional weight of Catherine's family legacy against him. He looked up and found Clara watching him, and neither of them pretended she hadn't been. "You should know," he said, setting the letter down, "that this is about you." "I know," Clara said. "I'm going to the meeting. I intend to handle it." "I know that too." He looked at her for a moment. "Is there anything you want to tell me before I walk into a room and defend a position I may not have complete information on?" Clara thought about the laptop, about the search she had run 3 nights ago, and the searches she had run every night since, building the chain link by link, following the trail of a Delaware shell company backward through public records and court filings until she had arrived at 2 in the morning on Sunday at a document she had not expected to find. A certified corporate filing. Hargrove Property Development LLC, managing partner listed on the original Delaware registration, D.A. Whitmore acting through Whitmore Family Holdings. Diana. It had been Diana. "Yes," Clara said. "There is something I want to tell you, but I need you to hear all of it before you react." He said, "All right." She sat down across from him at the kitchen table and told him. Not everything, not the years of it, not the weight of it, but the facts, the Bridgeport case, the property, the documents that had appeared to implicate her, and the chain she had now traced from those documents back to their source. The firm code that connected the Bridgeport filing to Mercer, Holt. The corporate registration that connected Hargrove LLC to D.A. Whitmore. Nathaniel listened without interrupting. He was very still in the way that men are still when they are recalibrating something fundamental about their understanding of a situation. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You're telling me," he said, "that Diana orchestrated the case that got you disbarred. I'm telling you that the evidence I've found suggests that the company on the other side of my case in 2021 was controlled by Diana. I'm telling you that the documents used to implicate me passed through a notary whose firm code appears in Mercer, Holt's certification records. I'm telling you that the property at the center of that case was adjacent to a Hale Foundation acquisition that Diana was involved in structuring." She paused. "I can't tell you, with what I currently have, exactly how all the pieces connect, but I can tell you it's not a coincidence. Why would Diana do this? 3 years ago, you were a young associate at a firm she had no connection to. I was representing a woman named Vera Tompkins, Clara said. Vera owned a parcel of land in Bridgeport that she did not want to sell. The company trying to acquire it, Hargrove, was offering below market rate and using pressure tactics. Vera couldn't afford to fight them. I was doing it pro bono. She watched his face. Vera's parcel was the missing piece in a larger acquisition. Without it, the whole development stalled. Nathaniel set both hands flat on the table. The community garden project, he said quietly. The documents I read in the foundation files mentioned an adjacent parcel that couldn't be acquired. It's the same address, Nathaniel. He stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the garden, at the hydrangeas that were beginning to show the first tentative buds of a season they hadn't yet been promised. He stood there for a long time. I need to see the documents, he said. I have what I can access through public records. The rest would need a subpoena or a formal request. I don't, she stopped. I don't currently have the ability to compel anything. He turned from the window. Thursday, he said. The foundation meeting. Yes. Diana is expecting to walk into that meeting and present a board motion to formally review household staff, using your disbarment as the grounds. She's expecting me to be on this defensive. He looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen from him before. Not the careful, calibrated version of himself she had come to know, but something underneath it, something that looked like it had been waiting to be useful. What do you need from me to walk in there with what you have? The preparation took 3 days, and most of the hours between midnight and 4 in the morning. Clara worked at the small desk in her room while the house slept, pulling threads. Nathaniel, on his end, asked his personal attorney to pull the foundation's historical transaction files. A routine request, framed as an annual review, which gave him access to documents that filled in several of the gaps in Clara's chain. He sent them to her in a shared folder at 11:30 on Wednesday night, with a note that said only, third attachment. Look at page 7. She looked at page 7, the property transaction record for the Bridgeport parcel, filed in the foundation's documents as adjacent acquisition, unsuccessful. Attached was a correspondence chain between Diana, as a foundation board consultant, and the law firm of Mercer Holt. Dated February 2021. 2 months before the case against Vera Tompkins had begun. In the correspondence, Diana was asking Mercer Holt to explore legal avenues for neutralizing opposition to the acquisition. The phrasing was careful, deniable, but the timeline wasn't. And in the 4th email in the chain, Diana had written, "The Tompkins woman has retained counsel, a C. Ashworth at a firm downtown. Can we discuss approaches?" Clara sat with that email for a long time. She printed the relevant documents, organized them into sequence, and wrote a 3-page summary in the spare, precise language she had not used in 3 years. The language of someone who understood how to build an argument from evidence, how to present a chain of inference that held up under pressure. She had forgotten how much she missed it, or maybe she hadn't forgotten. Maybe she had just not allowed herself to miss it. She was ready by 1 in the morning on Thursday. She went to bed at 1:15 and lay in the dark thinking about what it was going to cost. The thing about using this in a board meeting was that it required her to be in that room, not a housekeeper named Clara Dessa, but Claire Ashworth, a person with a legal mind, a person with a chain of reasoning she could defend, a person who had chosen 3 years ago to disappear and who would now have to undisappear in front of a room full of people who could make that choice very expensive. Diana could respond by pushing harder on the disbarment, by going to the press, by filing formal complaints with whatever regulatory body still had jurisdiction over a disbarred attorney conducting what might be construed as informal legal practice. She had weighed this. She had been honest with herself about the weight. The answer was still the same. She was going to go into that room. The foundation offices were on the 34th floor of a building in Midtown, with the kind of view that communicated power without announcing it. The conference room had a long oval table, 6 chairs, and a wall of windows looking south toward the lower Manhattan skyline that Clara had once known as well as her own name. Diana arrived first, with a woman Clara didn't recognize, in a leather portfolio. She looked at Clara with the controlled surprise of someone who had anticipated this possibility and prepared for it. Nathaniel, Diana said, I wasn't expecting... I asked Clara to be here, Nathaniel said. He was the version of himself that Clara had not yet seen in a domestic context. The version that ran a company, that had built something that required a 34th floor conference room to discuss. Quiet, precise, present in a way that took up the room without effort. She has information relevant to this meeting. I'd like the board to hear it. The two other board members exchanged a look. There were 5 people total around the table. Diana, her companion, the 2 board members, and Nathaniel. Clara sat slightly to Nathaniel's left, with her folder in front of her. She had not been offered a name placard. Diana reset, adjusted. I think it's irregular to have household staff present at a foundation board meeting, she said pleasantly. I think it's irregular to use a foundation board meeting as a venue for a personal dispute, Nathaniel said. But here we are. Diana opened her portfolio. She went through her presentation with the practiced calm of someone who had rehearsed. The concerns about Lily's welfare, the disbarment, the false name. She spoke about the importance of protecting the foundation's reputation, about the standard of care owed to a minor beneficiary. She was very good at it. She had the tone of genuine concern, the specific register of someone who is doing something self-interested while sincerely believing it is for another person's benefit. When she finished, she looked at Nathaniel with an expression that said, "Your turn to agree with me." "Thank you, Diana," Nathaniel said. "I'd like Clara to respond." Clara stood up. She was aware of how she looked in that room. The uniform, the position, the 3 years of having been made small enough to fit through service entrances. She was aware of Diana's gaze, which had the quality of someone watching an animal do something it shouldn't be capable of. She opened the folder. In February of 2021, she said, I was working pro bono on behalf of a woman named Vera Tompkins, who owned a property in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and was facing pressure to sell at below market value to a company called Hargrove Property Development, LLC. In May of 2021, documents were filed in Superior Court that appeared to show I had mishandled evidence in that case. Those documents formed the basis of the disbarment proceeding. She looked up. What I'd like to share today is what I've found in the 3 years since. She laid the documents on the table, one at a time, in sequence. The corporate registration showing D.A. Whitmore as the managing partner of Hargrove. The foundation correspondence showing Diana's involvement in the Bridgeport acquisition. The email, A.C., Ashworth at a firm downtown. Can we discuss approaches? The notary firm code, its appearance in both the Bridgeport filing and Mercer, Holtz records. She did not dramatize any of it. She presented it the way she had been trained to present evidence. In order, with sourcing, with the connections made explicit. She let the documents speak at whatever volume they chose. Diana across the table had gone very still. Her companion was writing something on a notepad. The 2 board members were looking at the table. I want to be clear about what this is and what it is not, Clara said. This is not a formal legal filing. I am not in a position to make one, currently. What this is a documented basis for this board to ask some questions about the circumstances surrounding the disbarment proceeding that forms the core of the complaint brought today. She looked at Diana. And to ask why the person bringing that complaint has a conflict of interest she has not disclosed. A silence settled in the conference room, the kind of silence that has weight. Diana found her voice. It was steady and cold, and it had stopped pretending to be gentle. You just made, she said, the biggest mistake of your life. Clara did not look away from her. I've made bigger. Nathaniel placed his hand flat on the table, a small, deliberate gesture. Diana, he said, I think we're done here for today, and I think when we reconvene, you'll want to have thought carefully about what position you want to hold. In the elevator going down, Clara stood against the far wall with the empty folder in her hands. The documents were still upstairs on the conference table. She had printed 2 copies. You could have told me, Nathaniel said. He wasn't angry. He was, she thought, something more complex than anger. I didn't know enough until this week to tell you usefully. That's not entirely what I mean. The elevator arrived at the lobby. They walked out into the cold midtown afternoon, the city going about its business around them. Taxis and foot traffic and the particular smell of December in New York. Cold concrete and coffee and something that might be ambition or might just be exhaust. Nathaniel stopped on the sidewalk. He turned to face her. "What happens now?" he said. "To you, not to Diana, not to the board, to you." Clara thought about the question honestly. Diana could go public with the disbarment, try to frame it as retaliation on my part. She could file a complaint suggesting I conducted informal legal practice without a license. She could do both. She paused. Or she could decide that the risk of what I've documented being examined further is greater than whatever she gains by pushing. I'll have my attorney look at the documents. All of them. If what you've put together holds, it holds, Clara said quietly. You know it holds. He looked at her for a moment. The winter light was doing the thing it did over Manhattan in December, falling at the specific angle that makes the buildings look like they're made of something more permanent than glass and steel. You could fight the disbarment, he said. With this, you could actually fight it. She had thought about nothing else for 4 days. Yes, she said. Then you should. It's not that simple. The process takes, Clara. He said the name the way she had heard almost no one say it since she had chosen it. Not as a label, but as a person. I have lawyers. I have resources. I have the motivation to see this particular thread pulled, for reasons that have nothing to do with you. I don't want to be something you take care of, she said, and it came out more sharply than she intended, the edge of 3 years of not being taken care of catching in her voice like a splinter. He looked at her. That's not what I'm offering, he said, and his voice had in it something that hadn't been there before. Not tenderness exactly, but the shape that tenderness makes when a very guarded person tries to express it without exposing himself. I'm offering to do what should have been done 3 years ago by someone who should have been in your corner then, because I have the ability to do it and I would like to. She said nothing. Above them, 34 floors up, Diana Whitmore was still in a conference room, and whatever calculation she was running was still running. Clara looked at the skyline. She looked at it the way she used to look at it, from a different office, in a different life, as something she was part of. I need to think, she said. All right, Nathaniel said. They walked to where his car was waiting, and neither of them said anything else, and the city moved around them with its usual indifference, and Clara thought about what it cost to let someone stand in your corner, and whether she still remembered how to allow that. The smallest witness. Diana called Nathaniel at 8:30 Thursday evening, before he had removed his coat. Clara heard his side of the conversation from the kitchen, where she was making Lily's dinner, while Lily sat at the island working on a drawing she had been very secretive about for the past 4 days, curving her arm around it whenever Clara leaned in to look. I understand your position, Diana, Nathaniel's voice from the hallway, controlled the way things are controlled when they are under pressure from multiple directions. I don't think this is a productive direction for either of us. A pause. I'm familiar with what you can and can't do, and I suggest you speak with your attorney before you decide what you're going to do. A longer pause and then a silence that had a quality Clara recognized. The silence of someone on the other end of a phone saying something they have been holding in reserve. Then do it, Nathaniel said, and we'll see what happens. He came into the kitchen. He looked tired in a specific way. Not physically tired, but the tiredness of someone who has spent the day in rooms where every word has a cost. She's going to go to the press, he said. I expected that, Clara said. She says she has 3 people who were deposed in the original proceeding who will say on record that you acted improperly. She does have those people. Clara plated Lily's pasta. 2 of them are former Hargrove employees. The third worked at Mercer, Holt, before he retired. She set the plate in front of Lily and met Nathaniel's eyes. They may still say it. I can't stop that, but their testimony looks different when there's context. My attorney called. He's reviewed the documents. He says the chain you've built is... Nathaniel paused, searching for the right word. He says it's the kind of thing that makes a disbarment board take a second look. Lily looked up from her drawing. Are you fighting with Aunt Diana? We're having a disagreement, Nathaniel said. About Clara, Lily said. A beat. Yes. Lily looked at Clara with the steady, evaluating gaze she had inherited from someone who was no longer there to deploy it. You should win, she said simply, and went back to her drawing. The press piece ran on Friday morning. A brief item in a legal news aggregator, not the front-page treatment Diana had probably hoped for, but enough. Disbarred attorney found employed under assumed name in Hale household. Clara read it at 5:45, before anyone else was up, on her phone in the kitchen with her coffee. She set the phone down and thought about what she felt. She waited for something: shame, the old flinch, the familiar impulse to calculate the fastest route out of town. What came instead was something quieter, something that felt strangely like relief. The name had been said. Claire Ashworth existed again, in print, in the world. The thing she had been hiding from had found her, and she was still standing in the kitchen, and the coffee was still warm. She called the attorney Nathaniel had arranged, a woman named Patricia Nguyen, who specialized in bar disciplinary proceedings and had the reputation of being exceptionally difficult to dismiss. They had spoken twice by phone in the preceding days. This morning, Patricia answered on the second ring. "I saw the piece," Patricia said without preamble. "So did I. Does it change your decision about filing the petition?" "No," Clara said. "Good, because I filed it at 9 o'clock last night. I wanted to get ahead of exactly this." A pause. "Claire, the chain you've built is genuinely impressive. I need you to understand that the petition may take 6 to 12 months, and there's no guarantee." "I know. And even with a favorable outcome, your career in its prior form—" "I know that too," Clara said. "I'm not trying to go back to what I was. I'm trying to go back to what I can do." She watched the light in the garden shift from gray-blue to the pale gold of a December morning. "There's a difference." At noon, Nathaniel called. Clara was in the garden. She had taken to spending time there in the mornings, and she recognized this as a thing that had happened to her, the way certain things happen, quietly and without announcement. "I'm coming home early," he said. "The Foundation's other board members have asked Diana to recuse herself from any decisions related to household matters pending review. He stopped. "She's not taking it well." "What does that mean practically?" "It means she's threatening to escalate. She mentioned contacting Child Protective Services, citing the presence of a person with a disbarment record in the home of a minor." Clara was quiet for a moment. The garden was very still. "That's a serious escalation." "Yes, my attorney says it would almost certainly go nowhere, given Lily's obvious well-being and the absence of any actual concern. But the filing itself would be a matter of record, and she knows that." His voice had the careful quality of someone saying the next thing precisely. "I want you to know that I'm not going to make any decisions that would—" He stopped again. He was, she thought, having a version of the same problem he always had. Too much to say. No reliable route between thought and word. "I need you to tell me what you want me to do," he said finally. It was, she recognized, the most honest thing he had said to her. Not "this is what I will do," or "don't worry, I'll handle it." "What do you want?" As if she were a person whose wants counted in the shape of this situation. "I think," she said slowly, "that Diana is afraid. I think afraid people do reckless things. And I think the reckless thing she's about to do is going to undo her more thoroughly than anything I've built." "Explain." "If she files with Child Protective Services, there's a formal investigation. In a formal investigation, the context of the complaint becomes relevant. Why is she filing? What's her basis? And in answering those questions, the documents I've compiled become formally relevant to a proceeding, which means they become discoverable." She paused. "She's about to hand us the mechanism to get the chain of evidence in front of a body with actual authority." A long silence. "You have a very specific kind of mind," Nathaniel said. "I used to make a living with it," Clara said. "I'd like to again." He said, "Come home, we should talk in person." "Talk in—" She came home to find Lily waiting for her in the front hall, wearing her school uniform still, standing with her arms at her sides and the secretive drawing rolled up in one hand. She had the look of someone who has been waiting a specific amount of time and had decided the waiting was over. "I need to show you something," Lily said. "All right," Clara said. Lily led her into the kitchen, climbed onto a stool at the island, and unrolled the drawing with the seriousness of an artist unveiling a commissioned piece. It was a house, the Hale house, recognizable by the hydrangea bushes along the front path, even though Lily had drawn them in full bloom, the way they would look in summer, the way they looked in a mind that was imagining forward rather than looking at what was currently in front of her. In the front of the house stood three figures, one tall, one medium, one small. Below each figure, Lily had written a name in her careful, block letter handwriting. Daddy, Clara, Lily. Under the house, in slightly larger letters, Home. Clara looked at the drawing for a long time. She was aware that her face was doing something she wasn't quite managing to control. Something around the eyes. Something that would have been obvious to anyone who was watching. Lily was watching. I made it 4 days ago, Lily said. I was going to wait to show you, but I didn't want to wait anymore. She smoothed one edge of the paper with a precise, proprietary gesture. You're in the middle because I thought you might like to be in the middle. Is that okay? Clara reached out and straightened the edge of the drawing, the same small, unnecessary gesture she had been making with this child's blankets and plates and braids for weeks. The gesture that meant I am here. That's okay, she said. Lily nodded, satisfied. Clara, are you crying a little? I'm not. Your eyes are doing a thing. It's the light. There's no sun right now, it's December. So Lily looked at her with patient, affectionate skepticism. It's okay to be a little bit crying. Mom cried at my drawings too. She said it was a compliment. Clara laughed. Actually laughed. A surprised, brief sound that escaped before she could curate it. Lily smiled, the wide, uncalculated smile of a child who has successfully landed a joke. They were still sitting like that. Lily on the stool, Clara laughing, the drawing between them. When Nathaniel came home, he stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at them. Clara saw him take in the scene, his daughter on the stool, her face bright and unguarded, and the woman beside her with her eyes doing a thing in the December light and a drawing of a house on the counter between them. He looked at the drawing. He looked at the name in the middle. He said nothing for a moment. Can I see? He said finally to Lily. Lily slid the drawing across the counter to him with elaborate casualness, as if she hadn't been planning this exact sequence of events for 4 days. He picked it up and looked at it, and something moved across his face. Not the flicker Clara had seen before, not the near cousin of relief, but something that had traveled further than that. Something that had come from somewhere and arrived. It's a really good house, he said. I know, said Lily. I drew the hydrangeas in bloom because that's how they look when it's nice. Right now they're just sticks. She paused. But they're going to be nice again. Nathaniel set the drawing down carefully. He looked at Clara, and Clara looked at him, and neither of them said the thing that was in the room, because some things don't need to be said when a 7-year-old has already drawn them in colored pencil. Diana's escalation came on Monday, and it took the form she had predicted and unraveled in the way Clara had predicted, and by Wednesday afternoon, the formal review initiated by the Child Protective Services inquiry had resulted in a caseworker visiting the Hale household, speaking with Lily, speaking with Mrs. Paulson, and filing a report that found no basis for concern. What the inquiry also produced, as a matter of procedural record, was a formal accounting of the complaint's origins, Diana's involvement, the context. The documents Clara had assembled, which Nathaniel's attorney had submitted as relevant background, were now part of a file. Patricia Nguyen called Clara on Wednesday evening. The disbarment board has agreed to an expedited review, she said. That's not a promise of reinstatement, but it's a door. It's a door, Clara agreed. Claire. Patricia paused, in the way she paused when she was about to say something she had thought carefully about first. Whatever happens at the board, what you've done here, the way you built this case, under the circumstances you built it in, you haven't lost it. Whatever you thought you'd lost, you haven't. Clara sat on the edge of her bed in the small room with the window onto the side garden, where the hydrangeas were bare sticks in the December dark, going through whatever they had to go through before they could be what they were going to be in spring. Thank you, she said. Diana came to the house one last time, on a Friday afternoon, unannounced, the way she always came, as if announcement were something that happened to other people. She found Nathaniel in the front parlor, and they were in there for 45 minutes. Clara stayed in the kitchen. She made tea she didn't drink. She let Lily teach her a card game she didn't follow. When Diana left, Nathaniel came to the kitchen doorway. He looked, she thought, like a man who had finished something heavy and set it down. "She's resigning from the board," he said, "effective immediately. Her attorney has advised her that pursuing any further action would not be in her interest." He paused. "She asked me to tell you, and I'm quoting her, that you should consider yourself fortunate." "She can have that," Clara said. He almost smiled, the fraction of a centimeter of it. "I told her that seemed unlikely." Lily was watching this exchange with the alert interest of a child cataloging new data. "Is Aunt Diana gone?" she asked. "For a while," Nathaniel said carefully. "Okay," Lily said, and returned to the card game with the philosophical equanimity of a 7-year-old who had made peace with complicated family dynamics before most people had learned to spell them. She dealt Clara another hand. "Your turn." Clara picked up her cards. A week later, on a Sunday morning that was bright and cold and fully committed to December, in the way that made the light look like something out of an old painting, Nathaniel came downstairs to find Clara and Lily both already in the kitchen. Lily drawing at the island, Clara making oatmeal with brown sugar, which was not on the nutrition sheet but which had become, by some unspoken renegotiation, an acceptable Sunday exception. He poured his coffee and sat down, and he did not bring his phone. He sat at the table for 7 minutes before any of them said anything, and in that 7 minutes, Lily drew a horse, Clara stirred oatmeal, and outside the kitchen window a bird moved through the bare oak tree at the garden's edge. It was unremarkable. It was the specific, unremarkable quality of a morning that is what it is, without requiring anything from anyone. "I blocked off next Sunday," Nathaniel said. "Museum. Both of you, if you want to come." Lily looked up from her horse. "The space one or the dinosaur one?" "Both." Lily looked at Clara. Clara set a bowl of oatmeal in front of Lily and sat down. "Both sounds right," she said. It was perhaps the smallest possible thing. An outing, a museum, a Sunday blocked on a calendar. But Lily picked up her spoon and ate her oatmeal without being asked. And outside, the bird moved again through the branches, and Nathaniel Hale sat at his kitchen table with his coffee and looked up, the way he had been learning, slowly and at some cost, to do. The disbarment petition was granted 14 months later. Not the full 14 months of the process. Parts of it were quiet, parts of it were not. But 14 months from the day Patricia Nguyen filed it to the day Clara Ashworth received a letter with a Connecticut State Bar letterhead and sat on the edge of her bed in a room that was now her room, in a house that was more than a place she was staying, and read the letter twice to make sure she had read it correctly. She did not cry. She had already done the crying, privately and at appropriate intervals, in the way she had done most things over the past 3 years, quietly, thoroughly, without making anyone else responsible for it. She folded the letter and sat for a moment with it in her hands. Then she went upstairs to find Lily, who was in her room arguing with a math worksheet, and sat on the edge of the bed and said, "I have something to tell you," and told her, and watched the child's face move through surprise into delight into something very like pride. The proprietary pride of a person who had, at some point, decided to believe in you before you had given them sufficient evidence to justify it. "I knew," Lily said. "You knew what?" "That you were going to be okay." She said it with the complete confidence of a person to whom this had never been seriously in question. "I just had to wait for you to know it too. There is a particular kind of seeing that children do, direct, without the filters that adults spend years developing to protect themselves from the full weight of other people. They look at you and see what's there, not what's supposed to be there, not what would be convenient to see." A 7-year-old girl pointed at a woman who had been made invisible by circumstance and said, "I see her. I want that." And in doing so, she did what the most powerful people in the room could not. She told the truth about what was in front of her. We spend a long time learning which people we are allowed to love across the distances the world builds between us. We learn the rules of class and propriety and who stands where in whose life. And then sometimes a child looks up from a drawing and places you in the middle, between herself and her father, in the house with the summer hydrangeas, and calls it home. And you realize the rules were never really about you at all. What you deserve is not determined by the floor you walk on. It is determined by what you do when no one is watching, and whether you can be seen clearly by someone who has not yet learned to look away.